People always ask me why I don't like being near windows at night. I usually laugh it off or change the subject, but the truth? It's because of something that happened when I was about 14. I've never been able to shake it. This was around 2009 or 2010, back when I lived in Tacoma, near a high school. It was late, probably around 1 a.m. or so, and my little brother Theo and I were in the living room watching South Park. My mom and her boyfriend were asleep, so the house was quiet except for the TV. Out of nowhere, we heard this knock on the garage window. It wasn't a random creak or the sound of the wind. It was a solid, deliberate knock. Theo and I froze, staring at each other. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Before he could answer, another knock came, this time from the big front window that covered most of the living room. I remember the sound so clearly, like someone gently rapping with their knuckles, slow and deliberate. I don't know what made me do it, but I pulled the curtain back just a sliver. Outside, under the faint glow of the streetlight, stood a woman. She was pale, with long black hair that looked damp, almost like she'd just walked out of a lake. But her eyes, man, her eyes were dark. Not just dark like someone who hasn't slept, but like there was no white in them at all. Just black. "She's at the window," I muttered to Theo, stepping back. He moved toward the door like he hadn't even heard me. I grabbed his arm. "What are you doing?" "She needs help," he said in this flat, weird voice I didn't recognize. I held onto him as hard as I could. "Don't go near the door." That's when we heard it again, knocking, now on the front door. And then she spoke. Her voice was soft, almost sweet. "Let me in." I remember yelling at Theo, telling him not to move, but he started pulling toward the door, almost like he couldn't help it. I swear to you, he looked like he was in a trance. His hand reached out, and I had to tackle him to the floor. "What's wrong with you?" I hissed, pinning him down. "She needs help," he repeated, but his voice was flat, almost robotic. The woman kept knocking. "Let me in," she said again, her voice calm but wrong. Like it didn't belong to her. The noise woke up my mom and her boyfriend. They stumbled out of their room, groggy and annoyed. "What's going on out here?" Mom asked, rubbing her eyes. I was practically sitting on Theo at this point, trying to keep him from breaking free. "Someone's at the door," I yelled. "Don't open it." Her boyfriend, of course, didn't believe me. He stomped to the door, muttering under his breath, and looked through the peephole. Then he froze. "There's no one there," he said, his voice suddenly quieter. "What do you mean?" "She was just," I started, but when I peeked out the window again, she was gone. Theo stopped struggling under me, blinking like he'd just woken up. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice back to normal. "Why are you holding me down?" "You were trying to let her in," I shouted. "Let who in?" he said, his face blank. I stared at him, and a cold chill ran down my spine. He really didn't seem to remember anything. I'd like to tell you that was the end of it, but it wasn't. Sure, we locked the doors and windows, and nothing else happened that night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had almost happened. The weirdest part? When I asked Theo the next day if he remembered the knocking or the woman, he looked at me like I was crazy. "You're making that up," he said. "I didn't try to open the door." Years later, I came across stories about something called the Black-Eyed Children. Ever heard of them? They're an urban legend, pale kids or adults with pitch-black eyes who knock on doors late at night and ask to be let in. The thing is, everyone who talks about them says the same thing. They make you feel like you have to let them in. Like you don't have a choice. When I read that, everything clicked. Theo wasn't acting like himself that night because he wasn't in control. And the part that still keeps me up at night? If I hadn't stopped him, if he'd opened that door, what would have happened? Even now, I don't like to think about it. Every time I hear a knock at night, I freeze. I don't look out the window. I don't answer the door. Because what if she's still out there, waiting for another chance? If you've ever had a paranormal experience, I'd love to hear about it. Share the story in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, stay curious and listen for the whispers.